Hello, I'm Jonathan Rosenthal. I'm the Africa editor at The Economist magazine, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Mo Ibrahim, who many of you will know, not just for his earlier career in business, but perhaps more importantly for the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, which was founded in 2006 and has been active in a number of spheres, but in particular in issues of improving governance in Africa. Mo, welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan, for having me.
Thank you. Africa, as we know, is sort of the least industrialized continent. It's contributed the least to climate change over the years. It is currently contributing the least to climate change, and yet it remains vulnerable to the effects of climate change, as well as poverty and many of the other challenges it's facing. Could you just outline for us a little bit more about sort of what are some of the key issues, in your mind about why Africa is so particularly vulnerable?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, Africa contributed the least to the carbon emission, and between 1960 and 2020, in the last 60 years, Africa contributed less than 3% of the world emission, and actually 3.3% of the world emission. Yet, Africa is the most adversely affected continent by climate change. The 10 most vulnerable countries in the world are all African. All of them are African. Climate change is playing havoc with Africa. Rain doesn't come when it's supposed to come, and then we have floods. The president doesn't know when to harvest, when, it's just a problem. And temperatures are rising at the fastest rate, in Africa. And unfortunately, because Africa is underdeveloped, actually, is also not resilient enough to deal with these changes. And the weather changes are causing a lot of problem. Essentially, it's around water, either floods or we have droughts. And the problem here is that these changes is causing displacements. Communities have to move because his livelihood is affected. And that in itself causes tensions and conflicts between communities. The herders move with their herds into agricultural lands. And the farmer, of course, are very upset about this. And that end up in conflicts in Africa. And is a major problem. Let's not forget that one of the reasons behind the disaster in Darfur was actually climate change. Of course, added to that, the bad governance of General Bashir, our dictator at that time. So it is a major problem for us. And Africa, unfortunately, haven't got the resources to deal with it.
Mo, when you talk about the African countries that are the most vulnerable to climate change, are we talking just purely about, I suppose, the geography, the kind of vulnerability to floods and drought? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, actually, as it happens, there is a close linkage also between governance and resilience, and yeah, they are all interlinked. And it is interesting if you look at our table for the African governance. So, we publish the index of African governance, and right at the bottom, to see that all the 10 most vulnerable countries are right at the bottom also on the governance index. So as happened, Bad policies also exacerbate the effect of climate and any other shocks. So there, of course, there is a close relationship also between the two.
Thank you. You already alluded to this, the link to conflict. You mentioned Darfur and how climate pressures are putting animal herders into conflict with farmers who are planting crops. I suppose we've seen similar issues in Nigeria and across parts of the Sahel. To what extent are we seeing the sort of broader kind of security and conflict issues, the rise of jihadist terrorism in the Sahel in particular, and I suppose the wave of coups across the Sahel? To what extent do you think that they are linked back to climate?
I think there's a link between all. I mean, let's start with government. When I talked about Darfur, and I said climate may have instigated the conflict, but I also said it is the fact that General Bashir and the Islamicists were running the country at that time with their awful policies accelerated the problem. And so when you have bad governance, country cannot deal with social issues, the issue of fairness, how to deal with conflicts between societies, is that different ethnic groups in a society. So that they are linked in that sense. And jihadists activities, the terrorism, etc. Jonathan, there are rules for that. This doesn't come out of thin air. If we don't have fair society, if you marginalize groups of people, we are really putting the seeds of conflicts, and that is a fertile grounds for emergence of terrorism and military coup. And most of the military coup take place when you have bad governance. I just look at where things are happening. You know, maybe with sad exception of Niger, because Niger was emerging as a better run country, and I have a lot of respect for President Bazoum, and unfortunately there's a lot of other issues there. But most of the other coups, it's happening in a situation where people feel that they are not properly governed. You look at Gabon. We have a family running the country for 56 years, enriching themselves on the expense of the rest of the population, and corruption and rigged elections. Nobody believed that the current president won the elections fair this time or the last time or the time before. And so let's ask a question here. What's the difference between a military coup and a civilian coup? You know, they both are coups. They both are a legitimate way of taking power. Military coup create headlines, but unfortunately, we had a number of these civilian coups, which we passed. We gave it a green card. You know, situation happens in DRC, in Zimbabwe. I mean, was the last election fair in Zimbabwe? Was the one before that fair in Zimbabwe? What we have done about that? Yeah, but we get excited when the soldiers take over. It's the same. It's illegal takeover of power, and this always happens in a situation where citizens feel that they are marginalized, they suffer in their livelihood, the government is not delivering, general dissatisfaction. Then this stuff happens.
Well, governance is clearly a subject that you put a lot of work into and improving it. But I suppose coming back to climate, what will it take to deal with the vulnerabilities in Africa? What are the sort of steps of adaptation to coping with this kind of erratic rainfall, drought, and flood that need to happen?
Obviously, we need resources, financial resources. And this is a big problem in Africa. We had the problems of COVID, and the rich countries managed to create, $13 trillion out of thin air. Africa could not manage anything there. And we asked our people, look, our people up, and we said, stay at home, but we did not send them food or checks or, or anything. Things are tough in Africa. And then we had the crisis of debt. We have so many African countries who the interest payments swallows up as much as half of the budget. If they pay interest on their debt, which swallows half the budget, how much money is left for education, health, development, and for fighting climate change? Nothing. It's tough. And there is a problem actually with this issue of interests Africans are paying. Africa pays like 4 or 5 times the interest rates paid by the rich countries. We have a problem here, Jonathan, which need to be dealt with. And there is a number of questions actually need to be asked of all these rating agencies sitting in South Africa and pontificating about the rest of Africa, about the algorithm, what they're doing, and because they are condemning Africa to a situation where they are unable to access the financial markets, and those people who are able to access have to pay very dearly for that access. And that is adding to the misery of Africa. And finally, the funds promised to combat climate change never really materialized. There's a promise of 100 billion, pledge actually, of $100 billion a year over the last 6 or 7 years. And this money have not really materialized. Some of it materialized, but a lot of it hasn't been materialized yet. So Africa needs financial resources, need access to the financial markets, fair access to the financial markets. And otherwise, how are we going to cope with this?
Yeah. When one talks about financial resources, you mentioned the 100 billion that has been pledged and yet never met, 100 billion a year. There are other estimates that go far larger in terms of Africa's infrastructure deficit and climate adaptation needs. What are the ballpark numbers what kind of numbers are we talking about in ballpark? How big is this challenge?
Africa will need, close to $500 billion a year if really it's able to deal with both meeting the SDG targets and also dealing with the crisis of climate. And this is a major problem facing Africa. And the funds are not available. And we need to find a fairer financial system and better architecture for the global financial system, which really enable Africa to play its role in this in the global community.
Yeah. So if we go with your sort of $500 billion a year as the need. And that's covering, as you say, the sustainable development goals as well as climate issues. How hopeful are you that we will begin to see those flows coming in, or do you share the concerns that have been expressed to me by some leaders in Africa that the pressure on the World Bank and other institutions to deal more with climate means that, in fact, we will see resources being diverted from the lowest income countries, the least developed, the most fragile, to middle income countries that are investing in renewable energy?
Absolutely. Absolutely, there is threat there. And we really need to understand these two objectives really cannot be separated. Because without development, without creating livelihood for our people, uh, we cannot move forward. And but also we need to deal with climate crisis, which is also affecting the livelihood of people. It is it is two sides of the same coin, and we have to deal with it at the same time. And I'm not asking for handouts. What we're asking is for the ability of African countries to access the financial markets, to borrow money at similar rates, at reasonable rates. What we pay now for our debt is a kind of interest rate the mafia charges, to its customers. And that's not tenable. It doesn't work like that. And also, the guys who put all this stuff up there are not meeting their responsibility. And they actually continue to put it up there. The average footprint of an US citizen is 15 tons a year. The average footprint of a Chinese or European person is 6 to 7 tons a year. And that's huge. Most African countries put up less than 1 ton per year. So we are not causing this problem. And the people causing the problem are not dealing with it and are not paying for sorting the problem out. Now, if you break it, you fix it. Is that not a natural justice? Uh, I mean, and just unfortunately, people are almost in denial, and they continue putting up the carbon, and we continue to suffer. That's not tenable.
Yeah. So just coming back to your point, I mean, sort of 15 tons per person of carbon into the atmosphere on average in North America, less than 1 ton in Africa. And I suppose the other way of reflecting that is that the average African uses less electricity than the average American refrigerator.
Yes.
Clearly, there's disparity.
You put it up nicely. Yes.
So, what are the mechanisms? How do we go from the sort of issue of kind of historical and ongoing climate injustice, and then turn this into a mechanism that says we're going from complaining to finding solutions?
Yes, Jonathan, it amazes me. The polluters, the rich countries, inventing something they called it the market. Your own publication is a great champion of the market. When it comes to climate, why aren't we using the power of the market to solve the problem? It is so simple. If you pollute, you pay for it. And that is the fair. I mean, it has been so obvious for a long time that the only way to move forward is a carbon tax. That was the only fair way in order to really tilt the playing field, and that's how market works. Then the polluters will have to manage that because at the moment when the rich countries say, okay, we're going to pay $100 billion in this fund to help the poor guys who are suffering, uh, in their mind, this is like charity, and that's why they don't fulfill their pledges, because it is a charity. And if I'm offering a charity, well, this year things are hard. Maybe I cannot really meet that pledge, but next year maybe I can, because it's a charity. It is optional. And each country decides for itself what, this year I can afford this, I can afford that. And this is nonsense. This is nonsense. What we need to say is that if we need to limit our emission as a global, as a world to 24 billion tons a year, say, instead of 37 billion tons we're putting out now. This means everybody on this earth is entitled to a maximum of 3 tons per year. If we were to achieve our target of 1.5 or 1.6 degrees, in that case, we say, okay, you guys in Europe, you put up 6 or 7 tons, then you are 3 tons over your quota. Okay, so here is your number of population, multiply by 3 tons, multiply by whatever agreed as a global carbon price per ton, and that is the number you need to pay. And instead of the arbitrary number you pay to the fund, that is the exact number you pay because of your consumption. And that's fair. And so if we do that, we can create a global fund which will be now able to help the guys who are putting half a ton a year, 1 ton a year, and say, oh, you're doing great. Here is some money for you because you saved so much. Now, the market have created an incentive for everybody. The polluters now have a great incentive because they're obliged now by international agreement to pay for what they're consuming. It's no longer a charity. They have to pay it. And then they need to develop the policies now to limit that because they don't want to pay this money. That is the power of the market. It forces people to introduce policies to improve things. The developing countries now receiving money because they are not emitting enough. We say, wow. Of course, those countries will try to develop and get electricity now green because they need to keep receiving money. The market created incentive for the poor countries now to develop in a green way and to maintain their great rating. And also, we have money now to pay for the maintenance of the great things around us. The Congo Basin, the Amazon. Why should we ask Brazil to look after the Amazon? If that's a global public good, then globally, everybody should pay to maintain it because we are all benefiting from it. Same for the Congo, same for any other. And that way, the market is dealing with everybody, and that is the obvious way. And everybody knows that is the only obvious way to move forward. Can you tell me, Jonathan, why those very smart guys who taught us economics, who taught us politics, who taught us governance, who taught us about the market and the wonderful things the market is doing, your own magazine, why are you silent on this? Exactly. Why are you silent in this? Because, want to deal with it as a charity, not as an obligation. It is an obligation. And only the market can force this obligation.
Well, so in some slight defense of our publication, I think we have argued for many years for a carbon tax. I think that that's been a consistent position.
Not enough, Jonathan. Not enough. That should be. Where is the magazine here? That should be on the front cover of your magazine every week. Pay the tax. Pay the tax. That should be really the strong message out there because those guys are tone deaf. Britannia don't know market. What market? What are you talking about? Oh, guys, you taught us about the market. What is it?
I suppose I think the truth about any tax anywhere is that it requires some coercion and perhaps political power to get people to agree to a tax. Just on that subject.
Yes, of course, we would hate the word tax. And if you go to this part of the United States, we have large concentrations of Trump guys, Republicans, die hard Trump supporters, and you ask them about Obamacare. Oh, terrible. We hate it. We'll have to stop it. We'll have to cancel it. And then ask them of the Affordable Health Act or whatever they call it. Oh, we love it. Well, excuse me, it's the same.
Yeah.
They hate the name Obama. Then that's true. People did that. I mean, and the guys who benefited from Obamacare, as you call it, are those guys. And but is it, no, we hate Obama, but we love the Affordable Act. Okay, it's the name. So we are not gonna call. We don't need to call it tax. Two things. First, it's not tax on individual. This is a payment due in countries, so it doesn't touch individuals. Secondly, we don't call it tax. We call it facility. What we call these $100 billion commitments every year. They have a name for it. I don't know it. It's maybe facility or something, climate facility or okay. It's a climate facility. But it is a structure. It is structure. It's not haphazard. It's not the French put up the finger and say, okay, I'm going to pay 2 billion. The British say, okay, I'm going to pay 5 billion. No. You pay what you owe. It's not what so it is the same facility, but we're regulating it according to a logical, scientific application of exactly what you're messing up. What are you doing with this climate of ours? The more you damage, the more you pay. And everybody understands that. You go to a supermarket, you pick up one can of beans, you pay something. If you pick up two, you pay something else. It's the same. We have a limited resource. You pick up, you pay. And everybody knows that. If you don't want to pay, don't do it. Yeah. I think that is fair. That's what we need to be doing. And unfortunately, those guys hiding their heads in the sand and pretending you never heard about markets or whatever. This is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. And this is the problem we are facing today, is that we don't have statesmen, we have politicians. And those guys only see the next few months and the election cycle. They want to get elected at any price. Look what's happening in UK, in our own country. The Prime Minister thinks he can only win unwinnable election by doing the U-turn and climate. What is stupid? Is that stupid? You're gambling with our future because you want to say and turn down the street. Give me a break. Be a statesman. I mean, this is really sad.
We've got about a minute left. I'm going to absolutely agree with you yes, global carbon tax is certainly something that I and the Economist would agree with you on. If we had more time, we could debate.
Let us call it the global facility.
The global facility. The global tax facility. No more mention of tax. But I suppose my question to you is, unless we are blindly optimistic, and I think we're both realists here, this is not likely to happen in the immediate future. I mean, this is clearly a long-term argument that you and we are going to have with the world. But between now and then, what are the steps? What is in the power of African governments and companies that they can and should be taking, sort of in the here and now, to mitigate impacts, to adapt?
2 points here. Number one, I don't agree that we sit back and we think it is difficult to happen. Everything is difficult to happen. But if you and I and other people campaign, raise our voices, get the public support, and we tell politicians we will not elect them unless they behave, then they'll behave. Because those guys just want elections. They're not principled. They just want to, unfortunately. And okay, if they know now it is a vote loser, if they stand in the face of that, they'll have to change and they have this thing. So we should not give up. We need to fight. Secondly, as the second part of your question, we need to improve governance in Africa. We need to manage whatever we have in a better way. We don't have much. We need to manage it quite well. We need also to manage our resources much better. We have a lot of resources in Africa, which we never managed well, really. And that is a bigger problem. We need to deal with that in a better way. Green is our future in Africa, and we have a lot of the minerals which is necessary for the green revolution. We need to extract the real value of that stuff. And we'll have to manage. We'll have to manage with whatever we have, and that is the way forward for us.
Mo, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. Thank you for your cogent and powerful thoughts, and most of all, thank you for your passion and your strong arguments. So thank you, Mo.